Fellas, I know my last video, I was like, this is it. This is my final thoughts. But then Paul Tassi provides some information that I want to share with you, titled New Revelations About Destiny 2 Declines, Bungie Layoffs, and Final Shape as Make or Break. Paul goes on to say, as I continue to investigate this past week at Bungie and the circumstances that led up to the mass layoffs and reported delays, I've learned new information to paint a clearer picture. After a lengthy conversation with someone with inside knowledge on the situation, there's new information about how the layoffs happened, staff reaction since then, and the state of Destiny 2 and the final shape. Now here's additional context to everything that's happened this week and what's potentially ahead, though of course there are no guarantees with everything in flux now. Starting with layoffs, management said other levers were looked at to avoid layoffs. Now when employees asked if one lever was executive compensation, they were told no, and that it would not happen at the company. Now there's been an update to this. Post-publication, Bungie responded saying that CEO Pete Parsons and some other executives previously forfeited annual bonuses before the layoffs, but staff was not informed this happened until yesterday. The sum total of the bonuses given up is not clear. Now internally, really no one is blaming Sony for this, even management. Some employees were told that if the Sony buyout did not happen, that with current Destiny 2 performance, the studio itself would have been in jeopardy if they were still independent. Now this is crazy to me, guys, considering we know how well Lightfall did. Like, I know projected revenue is down, but come on, we had an all-time high with Lightfall. Eververse is still churning dollars. The fact that the studio would have been in trouble had it remained an independent studio blows my mind. And let me just say, I am a bit biased here because I wish Bungie was still solo, but that's a topic for another video. Now, continuing on, it cannot be fully confirmed among every employee, but at least to some, Destiny 2 director Joe Blackburn is not really considered to be one of the corporate culprits here for how things went down. Again, we talked about this in yesterday's video. I pretty much said that the executives, quote unquote, upper management, are folks we have never heard of. Now, the expensive new building was a separate project that likely would not have saved jobs given the context of when that was drafted and when work started. Similarly, the $1.2 billion in employee retention from Sony was spent long ago, often on buying out employees' Bungie shares, which then went to Sony. There's nothing left in that pot to avoid layoffs, which wasn't what it was meant for this late in the transition. Guys, this is crazy to me. That $1.2 billion, which was meant for employee retention from Sony, was spent long ago. How? Look, I don't know the details. Again, it was mentioned right here, often on buying out employee Bungie shares, which then went to Sony. But good God, that's a lot of cheddar. And this deal was only signed a year ago. Now, the trend line of spending on the game over time made the current year's revenue estimates somewhat logical. So yes, the 45% miss is important and was not necessarily some wildly inflated projection. However nearsighted it ended up being. This has been a real damaging drop post Lightfall in terms of player engagement and spending, and Lightfall sold very well. The reason why that point is so important, guys, is that our speculation was that maybe that revenue projection was just some crazy astronomical number that Bungie put out there. But at least from what Paul is saying, the current year's revenue estimates were somewhat logical. Now he continues, employees are extremely angry with leadership now and have often communicated that publicly in meetings. Bets were made that did not pay off, but those who made them remain in the company. A fact lost on no one. Now on to the final shape. The final shape delay was known by some a couple months ago, but it is happening late enough where there cannot be a 30th anniversary size drop to split the season, as that took around 8 months to build. But there will be something in the season 23 gap, though no specifics. Now keep in mind, guys, we had a long season before, season of the loss, 6 months long, but to bridge that gap, we had the 30th anniversary event, which everyone loved. Keep in mind, community sentiment then was very high. Now they want the final shape not just to be as good as Forsaken or the Taken King, but better. Hence, the good, not great feedback that will be polished during a delay. It needs to be the best, and it's viewed as the key to turning things around. Now I too can confirm from my own internal sources that yes, that is exactly how the final shape is being viewed. You know, we the community have often been like, this one is make or break. But really, there's only been one time where an expansion was truly make or break for Bungie, and that was actually Forsaken. Some would argue that the Taken King was that, but the state of Destiny 1 was much better than Destiny 2 vanilla. The final shape is going to have to be that turning point yet again. Now the final shape campaign and features are reportedly quite solid, even in its current state, ahead of planned future work, but they want to go even further, and there's some concern about crunch to make that happen, even with a delay. Now Destiny overall Part of the new PvP strike team was impacted by layoffs, but significant progress has been made on the map pack already, and it should not be canceled. Now, there was an update here. Paul heard that player security teams were hit heavily as well. Guys, I did some extra digging on this, and my source also confirmed that the security team was heavily hit, as in like the equivalent of being wiped out. Guys, that's bad. That's terrible. Cheaters are a problem in Destiny, and they're pretty much a problem in every game. But things in Destiny at one time were so bad, you couldn't play hardly a single Trials game without running into a cheater. My concern with this is with no security team being present, that cheaters are going to be everywhere now. Now, no significant changes have been announced to staff for the longer term future of Destiny 2 plans because of these layoffs and the delay yet. No known plans to reduce support for D2 below old, already planned levels, no new info about the long term or something like Destiny 3, which I did not get the sense was really on the radar. Now, in-game LFG has been tremendously difficult from a tech perspective, and reportedly was announced to the community before the devs themselves. It is far more complicated than players will understand, even if it seems like it's an obvious thing the game should have. It'll launch, but it's been a tough road. Dude, I honestly felt like in-game LFG was just too ambitious, and I know some of you are like, but Cross, it needed to happen. Personally, I think Bungie should just open up matchmaking and just let things fly. You're either gonna get good people or you're not. And I know so many of you right now are probably typing, Cross, that would be a terrible idea. Have you not seen Legend Haunted Lost Sectors? Look, I'm not saying it's perfect. You know, out of every raid squad that you may matchmake with, potentially only one of those people might be good, might be great, might be someone you may raid with in the future. Therefore, you hit the add button. I remember way back in the day, I didn't have anyone to do nightfalls with back in D1, except this one guy named Zelik. Now, Zelik and I clicked because we both wanted loot, but not at the cost of being dickheads to each other. I was like, hey man, I got Soros Regime, what do you got? And he was like, I got Icebreaker, and into the nightfall we went. Neither of us having a Galahorn, which was all right, because we were both chill gamers just trying to get some loot. And no lie, it was a very fun time. But right here, that part about in-game LFG being announced to the community before the devs themselves, I'm still trying to wrap my head around the timeline for that. And like, what was the pitch there? Did an executive just come in and say, hey, community, the year of Lightfall, you're getting in-game LFG without even consulting the developers what that scope actually would be? If that's the case, that's terrible, because that's literally putting your employees in a very bad bind that you created, whoever they may be. I'm not sure. Now, there have been many meetings about microtransactions where many devs wanted to reduce them, but they were always given the reply that they are necessary given how expensive Destiny is to operate, and complaints about new ones don't always reflect reality. Event cards may seem lame, but they sell well, for instance. Or you'd be surprised how many people are still buying the oldest expansions that we always say should be free by now. You know, that's crazy to me that event cards do sell well, and I shouldn't be surprised. To me, they're terrible deals, but I've seen firsthand folks well out in this game. But the fact that the developers were actually bringing these microtransaction woes, and we made a video on this earlier this year, this tells me the devs themselves, they know, they understand. And again, they play Destiny 2, so it's not like they don't get this. They literally see it when they play the game, and it's so difficult to onboard new players. I know right here that buying those old expansions, people are still buying them, but I have to wonder if you had an ability to onboard new players, to get them up to parity, to show them old expansions without them having to dish out dollars, wouldn't that actually net you better player retention? Wouldn't that possibly give you future transactions in game? I have to wonder how much of these analytics are just giving you the win in the short term versus the long term. And then the question is, how many of these executives / upper management is really thinking long term? Now, the ultimate goal is very much for Bungie to be a multi-IP studio with multiple games and revenue streams. But even if Marathon is a success, there are likely not plans for some huge mass migration from the Destiny team to the Marathon team, abandoning the franchise. We talked about this here recently. My source also confirmed that Bungie really wants things to remain within their own wheelhouses. Now, just thinking logically here, if Marathon ends up being like the next big game, the next Minecraft, the next Fortnite, dude, if Marathon blows up to astronomical levels, then I would imagine that yes, development will move from Destiny to Marathon. If it's about in line with what Destiny does, then they will probably remain within their own wheelhouses. But don't kid yourself, guys. If Marathon has just some blow up phenomenal success, if it sets a standard for extraction shooters for the decade, I feel like the executives at Bungie will in fact move developers to Marathon. That's just my thoughts. But for the time being, yes, that is the goal of Bungie, to have a multi-IP studio, to have multiple games and and multiple revenue streams to essentially diversify. Now, Paul continues, again, this all seems very self-contained within Bungie, and at least in this conversation, Sony and its own goals, live service plans rarely came up at all. Though I don't know what's happening at the highest levels at this point. The general mood of most remaining at Bungie is one of anger, sadness, and fear. Anger over how the layoffs were handled, sadness over who departed, fear that there may be more layoffs to come, and essentially no one feels safe. However, there's a lot of faith. There's some genuinely cool stuff coming with the final shape that hopefully players will love. Everything seems to point toward the final shape being a make or break moment for Destiny. But yes, it really may be that this time. I didn't hear anything new about what may be past the episodes, which will still make it out, but the player base and revenue has to recover, and new IPs like Marathon will have to deliver. It's an extraordinarily tough time for those that lost their jobs, clearly, but also for those who remain. Some in the studio believe players actively want them to fail at times with all the negativity, but I don't believe that's true. If the game delivers, it will recover. But the current situation is going to make the road ahead extremely difficult if the goal is to reverse player retention and spending losses. To me, it feels like pinning everything on the final shape is too many eggs in one basket, but we'll see. I've reached out to Bungie for comment, and we'll update if I hear back. All right, guys, that is that article from Paul. Paul, again, thank you so much for that. I hope this gives us a little more insight about what's happening. And again, we're still waiting for Bungie themselves to come out and give us an idea of what's to come. That'll be after next season. I'm also curious to know what kind of mid-season event is supposed to take place. Bungie, I would definitely recommend that be a free event. Don't charge. I know you may be hurting for revenue, but we are now in the stage where garnering the trust of the community is paramount. I'm still mind blown that $1.2 billion has already been chewed through. And the other question I have is how much of that is just Bungie being so ambitious? Again, Paul said right here that Bungie wants to be a multi-IP studio. And we talked about it the other day that the goal Bungie had was to have 4 games going at once. Dude, that is a huge undertaking. I feel like Destiny on its own accord, in its own wheelhouse, is probably extremely profitable. But when you tack on everything else, when it is currently Bungie's only cash cow, that would be tough for any game, even the most successful games out there, to accomplish. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this article, guys. We also did a video and podcast with SkillUp, Datto, and Bife. If you want to check that out, we'll have that channel down below. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.